All right, everybody, this is Project Herpetoculture Podcast. I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, joined as always by the very handsome and charismatic Philip Leitz.
Very handsome.
And as usual, I'm going to do our quick housekeeping and then get right into the show, introduce our guest that I'm very excited about. And first, I want to give a shout out to Dylan at the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show.
The GOAT.
It continues to be a great privilege to be part of this network, and we're really grateful for that. And I also want to give a shout out to Charlie for editing our audio, keeping us on the rails here, helping us out in that regard. It's really appreciated. And I also want to acknowledge our sponsors. So we have Redline Shipping for all your reptile shipping needs. Check them out. There's some awesome codes out there that you can find for a discount on your reptile shipping.
Very nondescript too.
They exist. And we also have Cold-Blooded Caffeine, and they're roasters of quality coffees from across the globe that also donate a small percentage of each bag of coffee sold to conservation in coffee growing regions that also support amazing herpetofauna from all over the place.
Hell yeah.
And then lastly, we have Custom Reptile Habitats. They've been with us since day one, and they're producing some of the finest Vivaria you can buy. So check them out if you're in the market for a PVC reptile enclosure. And yeah, with all of that said, I'm going to pass it over to Phil to introduce our guest and get into the conversation here.
Oh, thanks, Roy. Okay, so our guest today is David Ian Howe. David, thank you so much again for coming to chat with us. And just to make sure I don't butcher anything, can you would you mind elaborating a little bit on your like exact titles? And I know you're an anthropologist, right? But I want to make sure I don't mess with anything there. Could you talk a little bit about all of that for us just for a moment?
Yeah. Can I ask though, is it herpetology or herpetology? I've actually never.
It's herpetology and then herpetoculture.
Okay,
so,
that
yeah.
was okay. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. David Ian Howe's my name. I got a master's in anthropology, and in North America, it's different overseas. But in North America, you get your degree in anthropology, which includes archaeology, and you have biological anthropology, which is like primatology and human evolution, also forensics, and then you can do cultural anthropology, which is studying cultures, do like the Margaret Mead thing, and then you can do linguistic anthropology, which is studying like human signs and signals. It's different than linguistics, but and then archaeology. So I'm specifically an archaeologist, but it's all under the guise of anthropology because you have to learn the fundamentals of all of that to get your degree. And I went to school for hunter-gatherer archaeology, specifically studying like North American hunter-gatherers in the past. And yeah, like within anthropology, you can do any subdiscipline you want because as long as it applies to humans, you can focus on it. And I specifically study humans and dogs, which is ethnocynology. And the reason I ask about herpetology is like you could do ethno-herpetology kind of thing, like studying humans and reptiles. Yeah, which I don't know anybody that does that, but I do the dog one.
Well, maybe me and Roy in about 20 years, maybe we'll qualify as those ethno-herpetologists at some point. No,
there you go, nailed it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So ethnocynology, right? So I guess some of the things I'd like to start with is what were some of the things that like sparked your interest in that, and or how did that, if it's something that's been with you for your entire life, like how did that mature, and how did that like buff out into, doing what you do professionally and turning into this whole like this sort of educational presence online, like,
Yeah, I could go on and on, but
please do.
Just always loved, for anthropology in general, before dogs, like I just always loved history. I was glued in science. I was glued to Bill Nye as a kid, and the Crocodile Hunter, all that stuff. And I was especially like Bill Nye and stuff like that. I was like, oh, you can like get a job just talking about science all day, but there's no way to do that. Like there's no school for it. So I just got really into history, and in high school, I was like a Rome total war kid. Like I loved, like I could just spit facts about like hoplites in Greece and Alexander the Great and stuff.
Let's
Um,
go.
yeah. But I found out like when I did history, I was really interested in like the Aztec, Mayan, and like Spanish like interaction. And like of course it's like not to say like the conquistadors were cool, but like as a kid, you're like all that kind of stuff. But like now it's like, oh, they weren't. But you're thinking about it. And I was really interested in that culture clash. And you have a Stone Age culture, Copper Age in a way, meeting with like a gunpowder colonizing European power. And like that's just fascinating to me. And like I was really into that. And I learned in an anthropology class, like, oh shit, I'm really into the culture and like the technologies. And I ended up going to grad school for hunter-gatherer archaeology. And like I wouldn't say like I'm an expert in stone tools, but that's like what I'm trained in. And like stone tools are 3 million years old. It's the first technology. And yeah, like you can tell a lot about people through that. And another technology that I like never really thought of as a technology is dogs. And I loved dogs my whole life. My aunt was a vet. She always had like 6 to 7 dogs that she was fostering. Like she had one dog, but then there was
Yeah.
always a new one in the house every week. And we had one as a kid. But I watched, I think it was in college. I had a teacher who was pretty into dogs, and he had buried like what's it called? Not taxidermied, but he had processed his dog that died, and it was just the bones. And they put it in the museum in Knoxville, like at a little excavation in the ground with like a trowel and stuff. And it was really cool looking. And I was always fascinated by that. But long story short, I watched a History Channel show called what was it? Mankind, the Story of All of Us.
Yeah.
And it's Josh Brolin narrates it, which is cool. So it's like Thanos is talking to you the whole time. But
Or
it starts
Llewellyn.
with like yeah. I can't remember, like it talks about humans in Africa, and then like for 5 minutes, and then the next 5 minutes of it, it's Paleolithic Europe. And within the first minute of that, they talk about like wolves interacting with dogs. And it just blew my mind that like the second topic in that show, which is a 10-episode series that's like hours long, is dogs. And like it just and I had a class and like with that professor talking about dogs and stuff. And just one last thing, there's a paleo artist which like draws stuff about ancient humans and stuff. And what was his name, Greg Harlan, and everything that he painted, it's watercolors about the different eras of prehistory in North America. Every painting has a dog in it, and it's just something you don't think about, that they've just always been there. I'll stop talking now. Yeah.
Oh yeah, man. Okay,
amazing.
so yeah, that was great. So there's so many reasons that we wanted to have a conversation with you, right? Some of it is just that Roy and I have a joint interest in dogs. We love our dogs that we each have. We love sort of like the history of dogs and trying to understand these animals better. There's the ways in which we thought, and we can get in, this might come up a little bit more later on, but like,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, a common theme for this show for us has been, or at least from my perspective, is that, reptiles are kind of in this nascent stage of domestication in some way, or like maybe, like obviously it's not proper, it's not well defined or anything like that, but it's sort of like had to start somewhere, right?
Right.
So there were ways that we thought there might be overlap between the way you think about and understand the history of canine domestication and ways that might cross over or apply in our thinking and methodology around herpetoculture and keeping reptiles and amphibians in captivity. And I think, again, that's something that we might buff out or probably flesh out a lot later. But then the more that both of us kind of dug into your social media presence and your podcast, we were like, oh, there's all these other ways that we have some interesting crossover. Roy and I both have a profound interest in hunter-gatherer history. We both sort of, the two of us have a kind of like a pet passion in thinking about, or we could sort of both subscribe to the idea that like, if you really want to have a window into why we are the way that we are now, you have to look at the context in which we evolved, and the vast majority of human history was spent as hunter-gatherers, right? And then you just mentioned some other things that I'm an artist. I went to school for illustration and like drawing and painting and stuff like that. And so there was a portion of this for me that was wrapped up in learning about art history. And that all starts with the caves of Lascaux and, the Venus of Willendorf and all these tiny little trinkets and things that we have from so many damn years ago and whatever. And so there was so much about what you do and what you think about that was like, we've got to fucking talk to this guy. He sounds like such an and so like I know this isn't like necessarily a fully buffed out question. I just sort of wanted to like throw that out as like a bedrock for part of how I kind of see the utility of this conversation. Roy, I'm gonna just say you should say something, because if I need to do it more often, because Roy David is not he's a wonderful person, but he's like an internal processor. So if I don't say, hey, out with it, Roy, then I'll just dominate the conversation because I'm
sure.
Yeah, I can't get in a word edgewise with this guy, Phil. He just talks too much.
I'm the same.
Look at him. He's yeah, but yeah, I can echo a lot of what Phil just offered there, in terms of just like enthusiasm about this conversation and what you're doing. But I'm curious if you could just kind of flesh out a little bit for us and our listeners, the kind of process and timeline of domestication of dogs.
Yeah.
As you understand it.
Sure. And I guess to talk about what you guys are talking about there too, like I view, like as an anthropologist, like humans as a zoological being. Like a lot of us, especially with like a Judeo-Christian ontology, kind of view humans as separate from everything else, but we're just primates that have a lot of sex and like eat food, and we like, we get resources to have sex and reproduce. That's like, it's fundamentally what humans do. And in that sense too, we always see, like, to answer your question about domestication, like we see it as humans dominate the earth and we pick little things like Pokemon to put them in like our little list and shit like that. But like we're zoological species that are also interacting constantly with our environment, and dogs and any other domestic animal are part of that environment. So dogs specifically, why they're the oldest and why they are the most successful domestic species, I would say, is, I mean, there's more dogs than, it's probably more cows than dogs. I don't know how that works, but just dogs have won the evolutionary game. They don't have to do anything. We feed them, like they're chilling. Humans are very social primates. We're the most social primate for sure. We're probably the most social animal. And like we don't fly, we don't have venom, but our evolutionary Darwinian adaptation is culture. And we leave Africa and just start settling the world. And when we get to Eurasia, there's wolves, more of them than there were in Africa. And wolves also, among all the other social carnivores, and like carnivorans, I should say, are very social. They have complex social groups. And about like 200,000 years ago, we start slowly leaving Africa, 100,000 years ago for sure. And then by 50,000 years, we're like full on out down to in Australia and stuff. And that interaction with wolves has been going on that whole time for sure. But dogs, earliest domestication we know of is about 20,000 years in Siberia. And that is because like in that glaciated environment up there, there's not a lot of stuff. Like it's not as abundant as the tropics. You can't just make huts out of any foliage you see. You can't just forage berries and stuff. It's a harsh environment. It kicks your ass, and you're going to have to compete with wolves. So it's pretty clear, like with our fire and our ability to make tools and like wear the skins of other animals, we're going to do fine. So those wolves have to like learn to adapt to human life, and they blend that sociality together, and they've naturally selected them. So that's the debate, really. They've naturally selected themselves to exist among Homo sapiens in our environments, or we artificially selected them to do that. It's like, that's the mystery of it. I think it's more natural, but I hope that answers your question. Sorry, I just wanted to tirade, but
Yeah, no,
Oh,
that's
that's fantastic.
really good. I mean, because you you have this one great video where you know you sort of start the video off with, you know, where does your food come from? Like, think about it for a second. And you talk about right, you talk about like chickens being from this like fowl from Asia, and then you know, tomatoes being, I don't even actually can't even remember all the different individual domesticated food animals and plants that we, you know, a small list of the vast numbers that we utilize. And like, conceivably, each domesticated creature that we use as a tool kind of has like varying origins, right? Like, some of them, you know, as you know, you talk about cats having sort of domesticated themselves to eat the mice as a result, you know, that hang out in our food stores and stuff. But then some of this other stuff was more like intentionally selected. And with dogs, it's kind of, we don't really know. There's it like, right, it's not like 100% clear, like this is exactly how it happened. There's multiple theories around how it happened. Is that right?
Yeah, like there's a new paper every day that says like it's 20,000 years old, it's 50,000 years old. And I touched on this in the lecture. Like, skeletally, it's hard to tell because, again, evolution's not Pokemon. It doesn't just turn into Charizard overnight, like it, or I guess an Arcanine in this case, but it's like it takes a long time. And when do you see that skull as a wolf just turn into a dog? It doesn't just pop. So it could be very long ago. But what was your question again? So sorry.
Oh, mine was just more about just talking about how there's so many different theories around
Oh,
exactly,
right.
right?
Yeah. So, and that's the thing, like, how do we know when it happened and like how it happened? But and with those papers coming out saying different like dates and times or how it happened, like the bottom line, if you just like pick and choose the patterns of all of those, it's that dogs come from a wolf lineage, and they are a wolf adapted to life among Homo sapiens. So whether they're modern gray wolves and just like an offshoot of those that got, you know, niched into what they do now, or there is an extinct wolf species or they have a common ancestor, doesn't matter to me. It's just they're wolves in general. And wolves, we can get into speciation like you want, but like wolves, coyotes, dogs, dingoes, they're all the same species to me. Like, they can all interbreed. They're all the same. Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's always the whole speciation thing. That's always a hairy topic, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's been a topic since Darwin. No one's figured it
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right, totally.
Totally.
Yeah. And it's pretty fascinating because uh it's really weird that I think you pointed this out in your lecture as well, which is that there's not really any examples of anything else that's done quite what we do with dogs, like that long standing. I mean, sure, there's symbiotic relationships of various kinds, but I don't think there's anything that looks quite like the relationship that we have with dogs. There's nothing else out there, right?
Right. I mean, cats closely, we could say that horses for sure fundamentally changed human history. The way you can ride them and use them for pulling. They originally domesticated them for their milk, which is funny to me. And chickens for cockfighting, which is also funny to me. Then we realized they shit out eggs every day. Like, that's helpful. But yeah, dogs, man, they don't do, like, there's nothing like a dog. And I noticed, I talked with this like forager guy. He's really, I can't, Dan something, some other podcast I did, and he hunts bears with his dogs, and was also a meat eater talking about this too. And like, I don't hunt with dogs, but I mean, that's what they've done for thousands of years. And talking with them is fascinating because they're doing what dogs do. And they said that like you can always see the bear before your dog smells it. But once your dog, like, you might not see the bear, but if the wind blows, your dog can smell it before you even see it or know anything about that. And
Oh yeah.
that blows my fucking mind sometimes because it's like it's an extra sense. Like, we don't have smell anymore. Like, we're surely older primates did, but or other hominids, but you're just adding that extra sense to yourself. And that's just one facet of dogs. Like, they can hear things. Like, I know my dog will sense a thunderstorm 2 hours before it happens. And like,
Oh yeah.
it's pretty cool. Like, and horses do that too. They know like when there's a storm coming too, they'll start freaking out. But It's
Right.
just like we've lost that nature to ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That's something that one of our past guests is a pretty renowned herpetoculturist named Philippe de Vogely, and he speaks about how one of the values of herpetoculture is that it's like you're experiencing another kind of mind, you know, and you're developing a different kind of empathic capacity. And I think about that a lot with reptiles, and just also the way that they perceive and sense things differently. Like, you know, as an example, you know, snakes, when they're flicking their tongues, they're essentially collecting molecules off of the air that are then being processed in this organ in their brain to identify their surroundings. You know, it's just this whole
Is it kind of like taste or smell, or like what is it?
Yeah, it's similar, but it's like it's their primary sense for most species, you know. And so like if you encounter a snake and it's flicking its tongue at you, it's trying to identify what you are, and it's probably detecting all kinds of information about you that you might not even know about yourself, you know, in a chemical basis.
That's cool.
And similarly, like there's other species of snakes that have, you know, heat sensing pits on their faces that actually can detect infrared radiation, and that's essentially linked with their visual field, so they can essentially see heat. They can see into the infrared spectrum, and it's so sensitive that like with the rattlesnake, for example, if like a mouse was to run by, they could like see the trail of the mouse in the footprints of the heat, like the residual heat left behind.
Yeah.
And it's like,
That's cool.
I don't know, just like experiencing stuff like that, I think is just, it's really profound to try and like, and I think it's something that like especially hunters can relate to, I think, because to be a successful hunter, I think you have to try and like place yourself into the experience of what you're hunting and understand it. And I think there's just so much value in that. It seems like a very deeply ancient human thing to do.
You also said something there that I found really intriguing, like the idea that, you know, we don't really use our noses anymore. We don't smell the way we may have once used the nose. It's like outsource that tech to our dogs in some regard. Sort of in the same way we're like outsourcing our memory to our smartphones and stuff like that. Cause like I don't remember any cell phone, or I mean phone numbers anymore. You know, I don't know about you. I don't really have them, any of them memorized anymore. But like, you know, we've been the way we've talked about reptiles and herpetoculture on this show has been like like the purpose that they seem to serve for us is one of like a sort of like a mimetic psychological purpose, you know, like we come into the world expecting to be surrounded by various kinds of wildlife and various kinds of things. Like, you know, that's why kids, you know, baby humans are so curious about the world around them, is because, you know, we're like trying to find out where the fuck we are, and like, you know, learn to be a part of this environment that we're going to we think we're going to have to utilize everything around us to be able to survive. And we don't necessarily have to do that anymore. And so there's this sort of way that, or at least hypothetically anyway, or theoretically, whatever, that bringing reptiles into captivity, one of the reasons it has some value is that psychologically it, you know, it's taking this thing that so many of us just don't see anymore, right? You know, like we don't, I'm looking out my window and there's a JCPenney and 2 other apartment buildings and some roads, and there's like an acai place right over there, but like there's a few trees.
Are you in Loveland?
No, I'm in Broomfield. So like,
oh, okay. I used to,
you know that area?
there a lot. Yeah.
Cool. So I'm like up in the Broomfield area. It's great, but you know, it's nothing like, you know, what we would have popped into several thousand years ago. You know, had a much more intimate relationship with the land and all the animals around. And so in some ways, you know, that's sort of why I was really curious to talk more about some of the various ways different things were domesticated, because I think that, you know, how many things other than, you know, maybe koi or bonsai trees or like certain flowers. Like how many things have just been domesticated for because we like them, you know? It's like, I just kind of like this. It's like, surely, yeah, some dogs, right? But dogs, no matter which one you're talking about, have some other kind of utility, right? So which is why you talk about them as a tool, as a piece of tech, you know. And I like in some of your talks and lectures where you talk about them as like this robot, this thing that you kind of program, this biological robot that you can program to do all these different things. And it's sort of, this is kind of what's something that's really, really interesting to me about reptiles. It's like we don't really have herpetoculture as a like an institution. We don't have any governing bodies that are really unified. We don't have a lobby. We don't have like any kind of well-defined institutional education as to how we do this sort of thing. We got a little bit in zoological education, things like that. But in some ways, this world for those of us who are interested in this is like wide open. It's just totally wide open as far as like, what's this going to do for all of us? Like, what's the utility here behind this? And sure, there are some reptiles that have been eaten, right? Like lots of them, chuckwallas, iguanas, butterfly agamas out, tortoises. I mean, you name it. There's been plenty of reptiles that have been eaten, but as far as I know, none of them are really domesticated for that purpose. So there's this whole like wide open field of what are we going to do with this whole, like how are we going to move forward and define this weird world that us strange nerds kind of identify with. And I kind of was into dinosaurs and Pokemon when I was 10, and so now I have lizards. It's not like a strict question. It's just sort of something that this is very interesting to me.
Right. And I think you guys both kind of touched on this, but like we are mammals and primates, like in that order, and we view the world through a human bias for sure, but a mammalian bias. And like we have parallax eyes, stereoscopic vision, like for swinging through trees and whatnot, and judging distance, which then helps us throw spears and baseballs and things and missiles. And like we see things visually for sure. And you're blowing my mind with the snake, like infrared stuff. I knew on some level they see that way, but I think like for sure too, dogs, like we would consider them not a higher life form. I just saw Guardians of the Galaxy last night and they use that word a lot, but they like we identify with them, they live with us. You can see what they're thinking. They function the same way as us. They eat the shit. They, need exercise, they socialize. But reptiles, for sure, to me, and I'm just not around them too often, are just very different. And like, I think it's hard for people to identify with them in ways like that because you don't know what they're thinking. They kind of just seem like bugs sometimes. They just sit there and then move when they see a person, just like a bug would. But like, they're obviously like friend-shaped Y pet or whatever that meme is with the Komodo dragon. Like they look like a dog. It's like kind of cool. And yeah, I don't know. It's just like I can't get inside the mind of a reptile, much less I can like a dog too. But it's just interesting to me, and I know nothing about it. But people like you guys that are into reptiles and understand them well, like I got mad respect for it because it, like, I would just love to know more about like how they think. Like, I guess I'll kind of steer it this way. I kind of see like life as like when you leave something in the fridge too long and it grows mold and you throw it out, like life just starts as that on Earth, and then it just replicates into different things, and you get mammals, you get plants, you get fungi. Like what do reptiles do? Like what's the purpose they serve, and like why are they adapted that way?
Oh man,
I'm sure that's loaded, but
yeah, it is. I mean, it's a great question though, right? So I mean, I think the one of the ways to start answering that question, and I'm sure Roy will have more to say and add to this, is it depends on which one, right?
Yeah.
Because they exist on every continent except Antarctica, and like they're everywhere. And in whether it's a snake, a frog, a salamander, a newt, a lizard, a tortoise, a tuatara, a turtle,
A bird.
Sorry?
A bird.
Oh yeah, bird. Whatever, bro. Birds suck. No, I'm just kidding. I love birds too, but I grew up pre-feathered dinosaurs, and there's a part of me that still just wants to throw up when I think of T-Rex with feathers.
Right.
No, it's super cool. No, I'm just playing around. The idea of a feathered T-Rex that hunts in packs is dope as hell. But anyway, tangent. But
Yeah. Did you guys
yeah,
see 65?
yes, dude. Yes.
No, I
After
didn't.
20 years of people being like dinosaurs have feathers, they had 20 years to make that movie with none of them had a feather. I thought that was funny.
So bad. It was so unbelievable.
Didn't love it.
No, I did
Damn
not
it.
either. It was
Yeah, it's
Roy,
just
you
Adam
Need
Driver
another good
heavy
dinosaur
breathing.
movie. I
yeah.
mean, Jurassic Park 1 is still just like
It's the OP.
holds up.
Like, yeah, you can't. Anyway, sorry, I distracted us, but yeah, thought that was funny.
No, it's okay. It was funny. 65 was terrible, and it'd be hard to repeat Jurassic Park somehow. But yeah. So it depends on which animal, right? Some of them are absolute peak predators, like you got your Komodo dragons. Some of them are like absolute grazers, like you got your giant tortoises, whether it's Galapagos tortoises, Aldabra tortoises, African spur-thigh tortoises. Actually, the plethora of incredible tortoises across the continent of Africa is just absolutely mind-blowing. There's so many of them, and so many different tiny little ones and giant bastards, huge ones. Like Roy, how would you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me is like, just as there are, of a wide range of expressions of mammal life, you have this, and that fulfill a wide range of ecological niches. You have the same with reptiles, and I would say it's actually even broader with reptiles, especially if you're including the avian reptiles, birds. There's two there's the two major lineages of reptiles essentially that remain right now, and like you have the snakes and lizards are over here, and then you have this other lineage over here, and it includes crocodilians, chelonians, which is turtles and tortoises, and then birds. So like birds and crocodiles are more closely related than crocodiles and lizards.
That is cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really wild. I mean, I would have never thought that. But then if you look at like a chicken's foot and then a crocodile's foot, it's like, oh, I can kind of see that,
Yeah.
or at least for me. But so I think
You're
of that,
right,
but I think
dude.
about
Sorry, it's cut you off.
No,
But
go ahead.
I was eating dim sum a few years ago in Chinatown in New York with a friend, and like the chicken feet you eat there, like it's reptilian. Like I didn't think about that. Yeah.
It totally is, yeah.
Huh.
And I think that what's really interesting about reptiles, though, and really distinct from mammals is, well, one thing is their thermal ecology is really different. So and because of that, their efficiency is far greater. So like, I remember encountering a statistic at one point that was something like 98% of the energy that we take in calorically as humans goes toward maintaining homeostasis, essentially maintaining our body temperature. And that leaves, the remaining 2% or whatever for growth, recovery, repair, all of that. With reptiles, on average, because they're ectotherms and they rely on warmth from the sun essentially to maintain their body temperature, 93% of the caloric intake that they receive from their food is available for growth, recovery, repair,
Wild.
all of that.
So that's really cool.
They're just profoundly efficient animals. And like in the case of, you could take a rattlesnake, for example, a rattlesnake can easily survive off of one rodent a year, and its needs for survival.
I can't imagine only eating dim sum once a year. That would be a real
yeah.
But then that leads to another greater question, which is like, well, then how do they have enjoyment if they're not able to eat all the time?
Yeah. Maybe they just don't have dopamine receptors the same way we do or something.
Yeah.
But with the rattlesnake only being able to, I mean, if it doesn't, it probably could eat more than it needs to, I guess. But
yeah, it definitely would.
what do they serve other than like just are they predators to cull other animals down or like what?
Yeah. So they
Okay.
would definitely serve. I mean, in terms of ecological function, they help to control things like rodent populations.
Okay.
They also serve a secondary like seed dispersal role. So
Okay,
like
like
by
primates.
consuming rodents that have been consuming grass seed, for example, then they would excrete that grass seed in their, in their feces, and that it actually would, in some cases, I think it actually provides the correct scarification that's needed for those seeds to then germinate, that kind of
Okay.
thing. So yeah, when people talk about
Not to
ecological
mention
functions,
herbivores too. I mean, the countless,
yeah,
all the herbivorous reptiles do this, have that same thing.
totally, yeah.
Seed
Hmm.
everywhere. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Roy. I just
Yeah.
mentioned
No,
rattlesnakes, and I
there's,
was like, what about the
but it's
chuckwalla?
the whole gamut. I mean, like in terms of function, it depends on the reptile, and like they really do serve the full gamut. There was just a study that came out, I think last week or something, about like the first confirmed identification of a frog participating a role in a role of pollinating this
Okay.
rare species of flower. So it's just as broad as in any of the other animal kingdoms, in terms of their ecological functions.
Mhm.
Same applies to reptiles.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, you got it.
I was just going to add that, like, experientially too, like, I think one of the things that I've really learned from, because I've been keeping reptiles for my entire life. And one of the things that you find is that, like, experientially, even though so many more of their behaviors and expressions are not intuitive to us, the more time you spend around them, the more obvious those expressive behaviors of comfort and discomfort,
Right.
like and dislike, want and don't want, all of that stuff becomes so obvious the more time you spend around them. And the kind of extremely intricate and subtle communication capacities, not just between the reptile and the person, the human interacting with them, but also in between like each individual reptile themselves, like the ones, whether you're keeping them in groups or things like this, the kinds of ways that they interact, again, not obvious to most of us, but the more you see it, the more you're like, Jesus Christ, they are highly emotive, thinking and feeling creatures in a way that I think is not just not obvious, right? It doesn't come across to most people, I think.
It's very akin to me, I think, to learning another language.
Mhm.
Right. It's exactly like that.
Like the way that reptiles communicate with each other.
Yeah, and also the way that we can learn to interpret that.
Gotcha.
I think it's
Okay.
like, how like we have shared language with dogs, like
Sure.
we've within this, like, essentially like mutualistic co-evolutionary relationship, essentially we've developed shared language that's, and part of the domestication process has actually amplified that capacity for shared language, right?
Mhm.
And I think that, I mean, obviously we're not at that stage with reptiles, but I think that it's a similar thing where, all animals obviously have the capacity to communicate with each other and across species as well. And I think that you can learn to interpret reptile behavior as a kind of language of its own, and
Yeah.
it's a body it's a physical language, body language more than obviously a verbal one. But
That would make sense from not knowing too much about reptiles. I could see that.
Mhm.
With dogs too, I often kind of explain it this way. Like our language with dogs, like obviously they can understand their name, sit, stay, whatever.
Mhm.
Like, because that sound corresponds to I do this, I get fed. It's not like they
Right.
understand our syntax or whatever. I mean, you guys know that, but
My dog is really good with grammar, actually.
yeah, good. Is it German Shepherd? Is it grammar Nazi? But sorry, that was really bad.
She's got one third Shiloh Shepherd in there, so that would explain it.
Okay, well, cool. The like we communicate with them through calories. Like
Right.
like the sit, stay and stuff, you can learn, like teach that with just positive reinforcement, I guess, like by saying good dog or whatever, but like food's the quickest way to speak to them. And then you could do the positive reinforcement. Like, I mean, maybe some people do it without food. I don't know how that would work, but yeah. So is there any of that with reptiles? Because they have to eat too.
Yes.
Okay.
They reptiles can be target and clicker trained for food.
That's
Um,
cool.
my
Like
so
Chris
I
Pratt.
work I
I've never even watched the movie and I know the reference.
You didn't miss out.
That's what I heard.
amazing. They so my so I work with, my primary focus of my work is with a genus of North African and Middle Eastern herbivorous desert lizard called Uromastyx. And they also known as like Dob in the Middle East, or spiny-tailed lizard,
Okay.
Arabian spiny-tailed, all kinds of different weird names for them. But they are highly food motivated, and I have a pretty substantial number of them at my shop, and they learn when I walk around. So one of their favorite foods is dandelions. They just love flowers. That's their whole, that's the move for them, and when it's hot here in Colorado, I walk around and I'll pick hundreds of dandelions, and because it's free food season, right? I don't have to buy salad greens for them at the store. I can just pick them wild foods. It's better for them. It's better for my wallet, you name it. And they will come ripping across their enclosures to me. Animals that would normally flee from me, that don't want me to touch them, some of them, right, will come ripping across the enclosure and just run at the sides and run at me for those flowers. They love that stuff. There's all kinds of interesting work being done with all kinds of animals, herpetofauna in particular, that can learn to target and clicker train. I've got some that I've had a pet large lizards, like large iguanas and stuff, that learn to love getting stroked under the chin, and they just sit there. They'll come and seek you out and just sit there, and while you stroke their chin, and they'll just fall asleep. They just drift away. It's really remarkable. I had one, and when I was in high school, I had a pet iguana who she clawed her way out of the screen enclosure I was keeping her in, because I was an ignorant dummy. And she learned that when I came home from school in the afternoon, that I would sit on my bed and make her salad, make her food for the day. So she clawed her way out of the enclosure and would meet me on the bed every day when I got home from school.
Cool.
And I would sit there and hand feed her while I was making this food. I just hand her little bits and then scratch her chin and stuff. I mean, they are highly emotive and highly responsive, and especially with food. Yeah, the communicating with calories is definitely the way to put it.
Why do you think then, because I never really thought about this, like why haven't they been domesticated then, like in the sense that we can train it? Because I guess you can't really train a cat in the same way. Like you'd see more of it if it was easy.
Yeah, it is hard. Yeah, I know people do it, and my fiance claims that she's taught our one cat to sit, and I'm not going to get into whether or not I believe it or not, because she'll but I guess I don't know, frankly. I'm not 100% sure. I know that maybe some of it has to do with the fact that they're not necessarily high producing animals. So like you mentioned, we mentioned chickens, right? Chickens produce eggs every day. They'll just lay, you got some that'll lay daily eggs until the day they die, or or like a cow can feed 100 people, whereas most of the reptiles that people would eat don't necessarily have a big bang for the buck. They don't have a huge yield in terms of food. The things that they produce that we might eat, like, turtles, like a lot of people have eaten sea turtle and tortoise eggs, right? But they reproduce once a year, and sometimes not even yearly, because one of the hallmarks of those particular animals like those turtles and tortoises is they don't breed every single season. They might breed once every 3 years, once every few. So it's difficult to get the yield out of that, right? In terms of like making them a food animal. They're I think that they're things like chuckwallas, you hear all about all different kinds of Southwest native peoples catching and eating chuckwallas because they're a big beefy lizard, or some of the iguanas on various like the Tinocera that live down in southern US and into Mexico and in Central America, the big beefy iguanas, but
Yeah.
there's just not the yield there. But other than that, I don't I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that, Roy?
I said to look up a chuckwalla. Those are
Yeah,
cool
chuckwallas
looking.
are very cool.
Chuckwallas are cool, right?
Look like iguanas, but maybe I don't know them.
They are iguanas. They are
Okay.
iguanas. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, why haven't we domesticated them? Why haven't they been domesticated? I mean, I think it's a lot of the things that Phil said, but it's similar. It's like there's no utility, I think, to domesticating them in the same, in the way that, like, again, dogs can help you hunt, or they can carry your supplies, as a horse would, they're not producing milk, there's all those things. I think that what's interesting to me is, like, we're constantly posing this question of, like, why do we do this thing? Because we're clearly very passionate about it and pretty obsessed with it, and get a lot from it. And there are a lot of people that start keeping reptiles and then kind of, like, go off the deep end with it and become obsessed, and
Right.
Get a room full of reptiles, and then it's their life. And for me, I'm like, okay, that's like, it's clear that there is a utility to it for us. Like, we're being met by the process of keeping reptiles in a way that we're not otherwise being met. It's like, it's very rewarding in that way. And and so the way that I've heard that described is, like, it serves an ethnozoological function.
Yeah.
To keep reptiles. And I think that's it's interesting to think about it that way. And I think, again, like Phil mentioned earlier, like, for the vast majority of our time as a species, we lived in much more direct relationship with our environments, with other species. And I think that there's value to interspecies interactions, that they provide a kind of feedback to us that we don't receive from intraspecies interactions, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And like sitting with what's behind you there, and like, do you guys follow Reptile Smiles on Instagram?
No.
She's a friend of mine. I mean, an Instagram friend. I can't remember her first name. I don't think she wants to give it out. It's that kind of situation. But awesome. Like, she runs a pet shop in I think outside Chicago. But she'd like a huge room like you have, and it, to me, it's kind of like a garden. And like, there's an archaeology thing. It's Marxist archaeology, but like looking at clocks and gardens and like Victorian era stuff, it shows status, and like you can control time and nature, all that. But
I know this account.
Okay, yeah.
Cool account, yeah.
She does that cool stuff. It looks like she takes good care of him too. But and I learn a lot from the page too. But the like, yeah, it just seems like it's like a garden. It's pleasing to look at. Reptiles to me are a little more like not in touch with nature, but like they're part of nature. Like, they're like the landscape to me. More so than, like, kind of like birds are, more so than like a deer or like mammals are to me, which move around a lot more. Yeah, it's cool. I guess I was piggybacking off what you said, but it is cool to me. And like, it's kind of that ethnozoological, like, being in touch with nature kind of thing.
And it's also, I think sometimes, there's like so my other weird hat that I wear is I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor and
Hell yeah.
coach and competitor and stuff. And one of the things that we learn a lot of, that I talk a lot about with my students, is timing, right? Timing is everything, especially in a combat sport, right? Like, you can if I just come out like windmilling my hands everywhere, like I might hit somebody somewhere, but it's not really a good way to do it, right? Like if it's going to be better if I wait for somebody to swing at me and then hit him with a big overhand right, it's going to land right on the jaw. Timing's perfect. Everything goes right. And I think like there's an element of timing in everything, right? You know, you in your lectures, you talk about the dogs are the oldest domesticated animal that we have, right? They're before everything else. Well, why? I mean, it's like timing, right? Like for whatever reason, at that time, however it happened, that was the right time and the right circumstances for us to bond with this other weird creature that has the similarities to us that are a little wild. But why wasn't it till X number of thousands of years later before the horse was domesticated? And why not X number of years sooner for like the chicken or what have you? And, you know, you mentioned, I've read about him so many times, but I forget the Russian gentleman who bred the foxes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's like, I wouldn't have known that you could domesticate weird foxes. I would have had no clue. And it was like, oh, well, this is the right time. He was like, we got to figure this out. Let's breed some weird foxes and see what happens. And turns out in just a few generations, their ears get floppy, they get a little piebaldism and they start to bark and they like to lick. And it's like, what the hell? You know, how it's so freaking weird how and why some of these things happen. And, you know, I think you were talking about plants too. Plants are probably the closest corollary to reptiles, and, you know, or freshwater fish keeping, right? These are some of the closest things to what we do in terms of why and how and all of that, because it's like, they don't have the same, I mean, obviously with plants, everybody loves corn and tomatoes and peppers and squash, and I love it. But with that, then we've got like tulips and fancy roses and hibiscus and all these orchids, right? All these plants that it's like, we don't fucking need this. I don't need a goddamn ficus in the corner of my house. I don't need it. And yet we have it, and it has this weird, you know, everybody does them and everybody keeps plants. And I mean, it's sort of an imperfect example, but
no, like dogs to me, I talked about this in a post like a long time ago. Maybe I'll post it again, but like whether you grew up in like New York City in a tiny apartment, or you grew up in, you know, Shanghai or Hong Kong in a tiny apartment somewhere, like people there still have dogs. And like I lived in Wyoming for years, and like I was pretty in touch with nature out there. Like the whole state is just empty, it's full of nature. But I got that. But even with my dog, and like, how would I say this? Like I got all that nature out there. Somebody in Shanghai might not, or Hong Kong, but we both have dogs. And it's like an artifact of that like ice age past that we have, and like their remnant there. So we're still in touch with that. Like it's the modern form of that relationship with nature that's like incarnate in a dog. Sounds like woo-woo, but like it's just it's there. Like you're petting a wolf every day, and like I don't know. I just always find that fascinating.
Same. And so something my fiance and I have been talking about, because you know, we're looking at trying to have kids here sometime in the next year or two. And
nice.
You know, we've got our cats, we've got our dog, we've got our menagerie of crazy reptiles in a warehouse. But there's also this other element that comes in with the dog in particular, right? Where it's like, this is, you know, what's that hilarious, I don't remember if it's the Spinal Tap or the Simpsons, like, this is a sacred bond, you know, like everybody says it in one whole group.
Sounds Simpsons-y.
Yeah, right. And it feels, there's something so different in the way I'm going to be able to convey the relationship that we have with our family dog to my kids is going to be very, very, very different. I'm going to say, hey, you know, in whatever vocabulary I have to, at whatever age I start teaching them this particular thing, but I'll be able to go to them and say, hey, people, humans, us, we've been doing this for more years than you can even fathom, for so many millennia, that when you look at that dog's eyes, when I look into Lilu's eyes, and both of our brains release oxytocin, and we literally love each other, like we get to have that with this animal that I don't think anybody else, most animals, most other animals don't get this. We don't get this with any other animal. We have this long ongoing bond with dogs that spans just as long as your bond with any other person. Like there's considerably no real, like when you were reading in that lecture, when you were reading those epitaphs, those Roman epitaphs to dogs, I was crying. I was like, oh, like this is
They're
so
rough.
Yeah.
And the
they are
fact
for
that
the
a dog's name
heartstrings,
is like
man.
Patroclus, like that's so cool.
Yeah.
Patroclus, yeah.
Yeah, man. Like they had named him, and it's like, oh, and now is in forever into the darkness of night or something. I was like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, and
And you mourn for dogs more often than people in your life, which I find interesting. Like at least your close family, you'll mourn for. I'm an average American, I think 3 to 4. Probably average Americans 2 dogs, but I've had at least 3, so probably have 5 to 6 by the time I'm dead. But like you only have 2 parents and like maybe a few brothers and sisters. Like you'll mourn for dogs more, and it's just as devastating too.
oh yeah,
Which is pretty cool.
It feels like almost like our relationship to dogs at this stage is almost. I mean, it sounds kind of grandiose, but it feels like it's part of what makes us human. Like it's like
agree.
it's like it's part of what makes us unique as a species, you know, and it's that relationship.
I really can't comment much more on that because it's just like that just kind of says it to me. Like it's just if you don't like dogs or you never grew up around one, like you'll still survive and like you just got to eat and feed yourself and shit. But like you're missing out on a fundamental aspect of like being human without a dog, I think. Maybe you can replace that with family or friends or something, but it's nothing quite like a dog. Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
So, it's remarkable. This is, I mean, so we've had our dog, our little wolf dog she's about almost 17 months old. We've had her since she was 6 weeks.
Cool.
And that's my first dog that's like, that I'm raising. I had like a family dog when I was a little kid. And it's like, it's honestly remarkable to me, like the feelings that I like notice myself experiencing looking at her.
It's ridiculous.
Like,
yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Sure.
It's like
I held my little dog. I got him at 6 weeks too, and like a baby and like that face and stuff. Wait till they get to 2, man. It's hell. It's like toddlers have terrible twos, but it's the same with dogs. Like I don't like when people compare kids to dogs, because obviously kids are a lot more complicated, but I get why they do it. But like I guess I should say I don't like it. It's just like I find it funny.
Yeah.
But like my dog was a shithead when he was kid, like defiant, and he's a German Shepherd Elk Hound mix, so he's really smart and like he just knows how to get out of stuff. Like he's strong, he's fast, and like it's fascinating because it comes from this little thing that just eats and poops, and like you're trying to teach it not to pee inside to like a full-fledged just wild animal in your house that and a shepherd and a wolf dog for sure are like, it's a different relationship with a pet than I've had with like a beagle and a lab. Like a lab is your quintessential dog to me. It's just goofy and kind of dumb.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah, totally.
But my shepherd is like, it's an animal. Like it's cool. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. She's definitely not. Yeah. My dad has 2 beagles and she is not those at all. It's a whole other thing dealing with Dalva, and we love it, but she's a handful,
Yeah.
I mean the 1/3 wolf is very forward 1/3.
Willful 1/3 for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And she's very smart, like scary smart.
Yeah.
I've been real lucky in my life. My family, my mom was always had lots of animals in the house. So I've already at like 10 dogs in my life, because we always had 4. Like we always had 4 dogs. It's the way it always was. It was pretty chaotic. But like, the one that we have now, the golden, you're right. She's not the same. A golden retriever is like the biggest dork in the world, just like a super dork, like, I'll do whatever the hell you want. They're great. Still a great bond and everything, but it's highly different than the Bengal cats. It's like it's just a different thing. So something that this is like a slight deviation.
By all means.
If are there any people or any individuals that have been of particular importance or inspiration for you in your career? People that stand out that really affected you in any sort of profound way? It doesn't have to be one specific person. Maybe it could be 10. I don't know, but just anything like inspiration wise.
Like first thing that would come to mind is my professors. Like in undergrad, my advisor like took an interest in me and like encouraged me to go to grad school. Then in grad school, I worked with like I don't know if you guys went to grad school or not, but like it's fun. It's challenging, but it's fun in a way that you're with a group of people that only want to study what you're studying. So like you're not people in the class aren't like just fucking off and like it's like statistics or math or something where you just don't show up to class. It's some like a group of people and you read a paper and like you all talk about it. Some days like you don't do the homework because it's a lot and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, I loved grad school, and what grad school does is teach you how to critically think in your field. So like we learn how to look at archaeological sites many different ways and how to interpret them, or like the ethics of some things, and working with indigenous people, working with decolonizing, things like that, and then like looking at things zoologically versus psychologically, stuff like that. And yeah, it's cool because you go work with professors that view the world the same way as you. Like you get to pick where you go. And like yeah, like I guess Todd Sarvell is one of my professors, and Robert Kelly, the way they view the world was really cool to me, like as zoological humans being zoological, and how you quantify things and how you can interpret like just human society based on stone tools, because that's all that's left sometimes. And like the amount of information you can get by just counting how many there are, what reduction stage that big rock is, like at the rocks you're finding, you can see like how long they lived there. By the deer bones, you can see like what season it was, or like how long they were there. It's all sorts of stuff. I'm getting off the rails, but the I'd say my professors for sure. And I'm trying to think of, I mean, for sure, Bill Nye and the Crocodile Hunter was his name, Steve Irwin.
Steve Irwin, yeah.
Just like as a kid, like watching that, like it just people that were so passionate about their field. And like I know there's the whole like nerds used to be nerds and now it's like cool to be a nerd, but like those two dudes, it was like clearly a passion for them. And like I learned a lot from Bill Nye based on his passion for teaching. And Steve Irwin, clearly, like he died doing what he loved to do. Yeah, just I would say them. I can't really think of any other people besides like friends and professors and stuff, but
Still, that's great.
yeah, those two. Or Neil Tyson too, in a sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I love
Oh shit. Dave Chappelle, my bad.
Yeah.
I know it's kind of a not like it's dicey nowadays, but I don't give a fuck. Like the
no.
In my first anthropology class, like I had watched Chappelle's show as a kid, and like my dad and I like loved watching it. But that first skit with the blind white supremacist, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
Clayton Bigsby.
Clayton Bigsby. Look no further, you found him. He in my first intro to anthropology class, it was like a 4-field just intro to all aspects of anthropology. The first day we watched that skit and it ended, like we're all laughing. Most of us had seen it. And she was quiet for a second and she was like, "Why is that funny?" And like we had to like raise our hands, and like one kid said like, "Well, it's funny because like race is just constructed, and like he doesn't realize he's black until they tell him, so it's all stupid in general." And like that blew my mind, because it's like she's like, comedians are anthropologists. They study human culture, and rather than produce papers on it, they point out things that are funny and like teach us about it. And like that really for sure blew my mind into like understanding human culture too. So I would say Dave Chappelle for sure.
That's a great answer. I love that answer. I'm a huge fan. Comedy is the best. Like
me too, man. I love it.
Good.
I did a comedy podcast a couple years ago with Giannis Pappas.
He's incredible.
He's so funny, dude. And like I do these interviews all the time, and I'd listened to him a bunch, and like I'd commented on some stuff, and he's like, "Do you want to come on the show?" And like it's fun talking with you guys because it's science and you're funny too, and like we can talk. But sitting, because my friends are like, "You're funny," like I'm the funny one of my friends, but sitting with a professional comedian while also trying to answer his questions about dogs was like one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was like a test. And yeah, I just love comedians because they're all smart and like
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yanni's like shy of being smart. I think is the funniest thing. Like he's embarrassed by it, but
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway, like it's comedians are so funny and like
Yeah.
smart. Yeah.
And talk about like a sort of unique and relatively, not even relatively, like highly modern specialized skill set. I mean, Jesus Christ, like that is like I can't, I don't know how people can manage to stand up in front of a massive crowd and they just sort of like command the winds to make every, you know what I mean? Like I know it's
Yeah.
scientific than that and everything. There's a method and there's practice and it's a skill and it's refined and whatever. I get that, but my God, it's a remarkable. My fiance and I, we watched this other show, Kill Tony. You know Kill Tony?
Oh, I love Kill Tony.
Dude, it's,
Um,
oh my God,
yeah.
one of the funniest shows in the world. And we watched that and just the stark contrast between like the people who come up and just do terribly and the people who come up
Yeah.
and just either do, even the people who do like okay. It's
Mhm.
like a
And then
they
Tim
also,
Dillon just rips him to shreds. Yeah.
yeah, dude, or David
Yeah.
Lucas just
Right. I do open mics a lot, and I like if I lived in New York long enough, or LA, I guess Austin now, to do it every day, I would.
Yeah,
But like my professors always told me like I was really good at lecturing. Like my one
yeah,
professor was like, it's clearly your superpower, not studying, but
yeah,
lectures.
yeah.
And because I wasn't the best student, but I picked what I wanted to learn. And because of that, like I do open mics and stuff and stand up to work on sometimes like jokes that clearly I definitely can't post on my Instagram that have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
There's bad or like about different topics, I should say. um and like you bomb a lot, especially like if you're going on later in the night and like everyone leaves because it's like midnight and like there's 5 people laughing, it's way harder. But when you have a full audience, Robert Kelly is a comedian, Bobby Kelly is a funny
Yeah, I know
comedian.
Bobby Kelly too. Yeah.
Cool, yeah. He said, like, I think it was Bobby, it might have been Bill Burr. I think it was Bobby Kelly. Said like the audience is your instrument. Like it's the only
Mm.
like art form where like you purely have to be on your toes and you do better and command the art form by based on playing like it's like a conductor with the audience. But they don't know what to play. They don't know what is like coming next. You're joking and stuff, so they have to respond to it and you have to do it well. So
Whoa.
I like that because if I have a joke or like, I guess to summarize it, like I do that to be better at what I do on Instagram and like teaching and stuff because it helps you learn delivery, helps you learn like, okay, maybe I won't make that joke about, gay people or something like that, like, a respectful one, but like don't do that. But then I'll make like this one about like, dogs or something like that. And it's fun. I'm going on a tangent about comedy now, but
No, that's a
it's
great tangent.
fundamentally part of anthropology. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I feel like, yeah, see, this is super interesting to me. This is great. I did not know that somehow that had escaped me that you also did stand up. I
I
heard
don't
you
post
say,
it.
you
Yeah.
don't post it, but I heard you
Mm.
say that at the end of either one of your lectures or one of your shows. You're like, and I'm also sort of a comic sometimes. And I thought you were just
Oh.
referring to the fact that you're funny. Like you are, you're also just funny. You know what I mean? I
I
didn't.
kind of say it as that, like, there's other science accounts I know, like of friends that just purely post like, did you know? And it's like science stuff, but like mine, I think does well. I used to be shy about it, but like now I just can put on my resume, like I do it comedically, which makes it stand
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And like I'm confident saying that, but to say I'm a stand-up comedian, like I wouldn't exactly like be as confident with that, but I do it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I
yeah,
feel like doing it is maybe the single qualifier, right? Like,
yeah, I guess so.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um,
yeah, that's
yeah,
great. That's so cool. And I mean, I feel like it's so related because, you know, all of this stuff has some sort of weird cultural purpose, right? Well,
right.
it's that's badass, man. I didn't realize you were this is such a cool thing to find out about a person. It also
I
makes sense why
appreciate it.
your lectures are so concise too. Your timing is good and you don't, there's not a lot of bullshit. You don't beat around the bush, you know,
Right. That
straight.
dog lecture too, like it's edited for sure. That's the beauty of doing your own stuff. But like I cut out all the ums, I cut out things that I fumbled with. There were several jokes in there that just didn't fall like land well. It's
Yeah.
funny. I've given that lecture like 5 to 6 times publicly, a few times on Zoom and stuff. And you can refine it like a routine, like a comedian, and like know what works and stuff. And I imagine that's what Neil Tyson does, because all he does is do podcasts and knows what gets reactions and stuff, and says stuff in his like borderline autistic way. And
Yeah.
like he like, how to say it, like, yeah, you learn what's funny, and like you can teach better by knowing what's funny. And I immediately know, like, I got tattoos, I have gauges and stuff, like people, one that hell yeah, it
Yeah.
it endears you immediately. Like I find just cursing immediately helps like teach better, because people are like, I can this guy's real, he's not like some pretentious ivory tower dude. And then like just the way I talk sometimes, like lecturing, I'm from Long Island, like I don't turn it off, you just curse. And like
Yeah. Hell yeah.
it like just makes it makes it less challenging to the public speak. Just talk the way you talk. And like in school, obviously you have to be like presentable and not curse in front of a bunch of people, but like I don't give a shit. Like that's do
Yeah.
it. That's why I do what I do now. Anyway.
You said you said something interesting there in the where you were talking about how whether you don't remember which, I don't remember, I think you said it was Bobby Kelly, right? Where he said that the audience is your instrument.
Right.
And I'm gonna loop this back to
Sure.
zoology, so just bear with me here. But also I have to make an obligatory jujitsu reference, because one of the things about jujitsu and submission grappling is, Roy, shut up, man.
Everybody take a shot.
Yeah, God damn it.
Oh, is
Yeah,
it one of those?
yeah, it's one of those. I do it every time. But the one of the sort of like defining features of submission grappling in jiu-jitsu is that your opponent is like wearing your weapon, right? Like if you're competing with the gi, that thing is what I'm going to use to submit or choke somebody or hurt them, right?
Gotcha.
If it's no gi submission grappling, I'm using your own body. I'm just going to use your body. I'm using your body as the weapon to bend and break it in weird ways that you wouldn't want it to bend or break, right? And I think the other thing I've said a lot on this show, and this is where it's going to come back to zoological stuff, is like there's a resemblance between herpetoculture and art. It's like an art. It's like a craft. It's an artistic process.
Kind of like gardening. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly like gardening, right? And you know, in the same, I'm sure the same thing could be said about dogs in a lot of ways, right? Like when you remove the sort of other utility purpose that they've had historically, whether it was for hunting or whatever it may have been, now everything we do about them is aesthetics. It's like, you know, when you watch any of those AKC dog shows, it's all about the look, and you know, and how they look and how they present it and how they walk when they walk down the
showmanship of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's showy, right? And in some ways, I think that's what's going on a lot with herpetoculture too, which is like you want to have an impact and an interaction and an exchange with living creatures. Like you want that, and there's like no other way other than, I don't know, having kids, in which you can like implement yourself and your choices and the way you view the world and your likes and your dislikes into living creatures in a way. There's no other way to do it, you know? So I feel like it's interesting. I don't know. It just felt to me, that felt like a common theme. I don't know why. It just seemed like a part of it.
With the art form of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm working on a video on this too, but like art is like, I mean, dogs for sure make you human, I think, but like art is definitely like what makes you human for sure.
Yeah.
And like your ability to express yourself and like what's in your mind, and like there's a lot of like our evolutionary adaptation is our mind and our culture and our ability to think, but obviously that comes with like Thanos said to Tony Stark, like cursed with knowledge, or like that. Like we have depression, we have anxiety, we like all life is suffering. Some days you have existential crises, like because we have our brains. But art like helps you get that, like Van Gogh, like he helps you
Mhm.
I was on edibles in New York in New York a few years ago, and like had this like
I've heard this story
reaction.
before, but the edibles is another layer that really just takes it to another notch.
Yeah, I
Oh,
might have told us on another podcast. Yeah, but like uh I was sitting there because it was New York. This is 2015, so it wasn't decriminalized there yet or whatever. So like
Mhm.
they were checking our bags, and I had just come back from Colorado, so I had a bunch, and they were checking the bags for bombs, but not weed. I'm sure they didn't care, but it was a chocolate bar. And my friend and I were just like, all right, fuck it, down the hatch, and like went in and had like, I'm bad in, I don't know if you guys are cool if we talk about this, but like,
oh yeah, yeah.
Of course.
cool.
Yeah.
I'm bad in public, like around a few people. I usually do it by myself or with a partner, and like a close friend. But like I was on a lot in New York City and just like,
Yeah.
and
That'd be
the
funny.
Van Gogh painting that was there was like, he had, so when it's like very brown and dark, he's wearing a straw hat and it just looks sad. And I sat there and like looked at it and was like standing there. My friend looked at the whole floor of the museum already. He came back. He's like, "Are you ready?" And I'm like, no, hang on. I was like staring at it. And this Chinese tour group came up and like they were speaking in Mandarin. And I was like shaking my head as they were still talking about it. Like I was looking at the thing. But I found out later, like, I mean, I knew he had depression and he ended up killing himself. But like the reaction I
Well,
got from that was like, it was just, huh?
Oh, there's just some there's actually some theory that he was actually murdered.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
well, either
There's-
way, I think
But
he
maybe
still
he
had
killed
like,
himself.
Alex
But
Jones.
he was
over there,
definitely
man.
very depressed.
okay, well, let's go with that for sure.
Yeah,
But I'll have to look into the murder thing. That's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that he was painting what was going on in his head. And like I struggle with that stuff sometimes too. So it's just like
Mhm.
sitting there, I was like, oh, that's why I get it. I thought about it later. And like that's when I was like, I get art now. Cause it's like you have this stuff going on in your huge complex lizard primate and like now human brain.
Yeah.
And like you have to express that to people. And we can't always do that through words or, you know, reptilian like displays and things. But like, yeah, it's been like you mentioned Chauvet and stuff, and let's go.
Mhm.
Like that's just like about 50,000 years ago, humans just like something clicks in their head and they have the ability to start painting and like doing all that stuff. And whether that means like you could now have mental images in your head, or like before that we didn't, I'm not sure, but like you wanted to paint them onto the wall or something. But yeah, that's controlling the environment around you is like art, I guess. Like that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. They're so
Mm.
I think even monkeys probably have images in their heads, you know, like there's I don't remember if it was Robert Sapolsky or Christopher Ryan, some guy, some dude who I was listening to who was telling the story of being out in the field and watching like a low ranking baboon, male baboon, watched a female baboon who was like in estrus and was like really clearly visually in estrus, and he couldn't mate with her because he's not the ranking dominant male.
Yeah,
And they
feel
said
that.
yeah, I feel, yeah, right. We've all been there. We have all been there. And he talked about this. This is going to get a little lewd for the show. I don't give a shit, but it's one of those things.
Sure.
The baboon apparently went like either like around the rock pile or around the tree. Oh,
Oh,
Oh, it's not me.
Phil.
Okay, I thought that was me.
Yeah. No, I think it's
oh
Phil.
boy, did I
We
freeze?
lost you for a sec, Phil. Are you back?
Oh, I'm back. We good?
Yeah,
Yeah,
now we're good. Okay, so we
baboon
heard
in a rock pile.
yeah,
So
baboon
like
and rock pile.
yeah, this baboon that had just watched this female in estrus walk by, like went around the rock pile and masturbated. And it's like that baboon, what do you think? You don't think that baboon didn't have an image in his head? Come on, man. He had to.
Mm.
We're gonna have to put parental advisory on this episode, Roy.
Yeah, now I have to do a content warning.
That's fine.
That is
Here we
interesting.
go.
I mean, I guess you could argue it's just the urge. But yeah, that is cool.
Oh, Phil, we're losing you again.
But
Uh-oh.
you know, the there's also I got, Sorry, gentlemen.
Oh, you're fine. You're here now.
Now you're here. Yeah, all of a sudden.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what's going on. I don't know why my internet connection looks fine. Yeesh. Well,
It happens.
anyway,
Yeah, you're there.
talking about monkeys wanking it, but uh, but there's also something about, we were talking about in one of your talks, you were talking, I think it was in the lecture where you mentioned there was a point in history where all of it, you had people who were basket weavers, people who were making tools, whatever. You probably had people who were breeding dogs for specific purposes, right? And there are times when I wonder, in the same way that practicing martial arts today and combat sports today doesn't necessarily serve any kind of warfare purpose anymore, but it connects me to the past of, connects me to human history, connects me to this aspect of life that, it is not really applicable to me anymore. There's parts of me that wonder if, like, herpetoculture and the desire to keep reptiles and propagate them and interact with them and learn about them is sort of like a oh god damn it, here we go again. Jesus Christ, I'm the worst, man.
No, it's fine. It's like completely out of your control.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's like a holdover, like if something about keeping these reptiles in captivity is like related to the genes that make you want to keep and breed dogs, because clearly they're going to be in there now at this point that we've done it for so long.
Yeah.
There's some kind of farmer gene, some kind of fisherman gene,
Cultivator.
Cultivator gene, something in there. I don't know. It purely speculative, but
Sure. Like there's like obviously evidence of like trade networks with stone tools and different kinds of like commodities and whatnot. I mean, mostly with stone because that's what you can see. Like there's obsidian points in Ohio, and the nearest volcano that it came from was Yellowstone. So like they were trading pretty far. But you can trace dog trading too through genetics. And obviously like it's called bride trading. That's probably a better word for it now, but when you're a small hunter-gatherer band, you only have so many people until you're inbreeding, so you have to trade. Hopefully that was usually through like peaceful trade, and I think people largely in the past were pretty peaceful because you need to know what mushrooms are over there that aren't going to poison you and whatnot. Like if you kill them, you're not going to know that.
Right.
But trade goods with stone and dogs, like I'm sure somebody picked up, and I actually talked about this in a podcast I think once. Like a kid probably picked up a lizard, and like held onto it because they're cool and they're hard to catch, and like you had a red lizard and you brought it with and you traded it for some like different kinds of seeds or something like that. Like surely that happened. You can't really trace that genetically, I guess, but well, I guess you could if there's like an expansion of humans into a certain area and a certain reptile. But yeah.
I think that's like one of the things that also makes me think about how there's I feel like there's a connection between hunting and doing things like catching lizards. Like it's like the child's way of starting to develop that skill set. I feel on some level, like there's a way in which it's like it requires a kind of obsessive like focus and determination and persistence to do it, and like an awareness of like the quarry's behavior at some point. Like I remember being like a little kid and like I know that this alligator lizard lives in this wood pile or whatever, and I know that at this time of day is when it comes out, and so like that's when I have to come back to try and catch it, like having that kind of knowledge going into the bank of my mind, and like that totally I feel like is stuff that applies to hunting as well.
And it's like sorry, someone was walking outside my door, that's why I was making that face. But I'll back up. The like looking for lizards in the landscape too is like it's kind of hunting and gathering at the same time, because you have to look for like with the parallax eyes and stereoscopic vision, like you use that to look for berries and certain nuts and stuff in trees, and like most edible and like good tasting things are red. That's
Mhm.
why a lot of like mobile apps like McDonald's or Wendy's and stuff, they're always red because it attracts you
Mhm.
for hunger.
Yeah.
But like you're evolutionary wired to look for stuff like that. So a lizard too, being part of like the landscape in a sense, like you have to scan and look for it. I mean, I don't know, maybe you can look for droppings and things like that. I'm sure you can
Yeah.
find
Mhm.
skins.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like I hadn't thought about that. A
There's
pretty
actually
like encompassing thing.
yeah, there's a theory of human evolution called the snake detection theory. Have you encountered that at all?
I that sounds familiar, but I imagine it's like that's why we're scared of snakes or something. Or
It's
like you're
part of
looking.
it. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of why we're scared of snakes, but it has a lot to do with it's a theory suggesting that part of the reason why we have the visual acuity that we do and the pattern recognition that we do is for detection of snakes. There's an awesome researcher, Dr. Lynn Isbell out of UC Davis, that's
Okay.
published some papers on it, and I think that you would totally dig that stuff. It's really interesting. And she also wrote an awesome book.
What
I'll
was
put
her
it in the
name?
chat
Write
for
that
you.
down. Oh, you
Dr.
put it in the chat.
Lynn Isbell. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat for you.
Okay.
Um,
So, excuse me, man. I keep like kind of coughing a little bit. I had RSV back in October,
Oh wow.
and it totally messed my lungs up too. And even it took me a long time to recover. Like there were several episodes of the show where I was like having to mute my mic a bunch because I
Yeah.
kept hacking, and it every once in a while it'll just flare up. I don't know. Maybe it was the Rona or something like that. I'm not sure.
Oh no.
But yeah,
Sorry to
uh,
hear it.
yeah. It's well. I just hope you guys don't mind if I occasionally am like clearing my throat or whatever. I'm sure it sounds gross.
You're
Uh,
fine.
so another thing, this is again, speaking of totally random and tangential, I heard on one of your podcasts you say that you think that the Sphinx head used to be an Anubis. Is that,
Yeah.
can you talk about that?
That's kind of like my Hancockian like out there theory, but like it just makes sense. Like Anubis is like really old, and like the worship of jackals is pretty old in northern Africa.
Mhm.
So it would make sense proportionally. It'd be hard to keep that head supported, but that also supports the idea why the face is broken off. Um,
right.
so that would make sense to me because it doesn't look right with the head it has now.
It's
It
tiny.
Um,
doesn't.
yeah, and I think there is evidence that it's like newer or whatever. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's kind of cool to think about.
It'd be way cooler looking.
Yeah, for sure.
Big ass Anubis, long snout, sitting there looking like a badass
Yeah.
man. Man, that'd
So you're
be
going robotic
so
again.
cool. I just oh god.
It was a
All
cool
right,
position
well,
too.
It was just like it was like this a sound effect there added, really emphasized it.
You're back.
Emphasized the enthusiasm for Anubis Sphinx.
I mean, it's a rad idea.
It is really cool.
Yeah. So uh I want to be, so we're creeping up here on 2 hours,
I
and I
got
want,
time. Yeah.
okay, well, I just want to make sure I'm respectful of your time and Roy's and in general. But I
I'm
have
about to play Zelda after this, so you got time.
sick. What is
Awesome.
it? Tears of the Heavens or something? Tears of the
Tears of the Kingdom, dude. I've been a
Uh-huh.
Zelda fan my whole life because of the archaeology in it.
Yeah.
So it's cool.
Yes.
And like this one's all about like archaeology, so it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. My fiance is a super gamer also, and she's like, oh, there's this new Zelda. God damn it.
You're back.
God
New
damn.
Zelda.
Yeah. All right. So to circle, okay. So this is going to be a bit of a backstep, but I read a book by John Bradshaw called Dog Sense, and that was one of the first books that I had ever read where I was introduced to the idea that like the alpha dog was like a human construct, and
Yeah.
it sort of like it's something that it really only applied to captive wolves, right? If I'm not mistaken. And if there, along with that, are there other like misconceptions about about dogs, about our history with dogs that like irk you, or that you would be like to be like, hey, just gonna knock on the door here, everybody, that's some horse shit, stop saying that.
Yeah. I have a lot to say about kind of stuff like that, but every other animal has like some kind of like there's dominance hierarchies for sure, and that's how you domesticate things. Like there's usually a lead horse, there's a lead bull for sure, like a lead bear. They're the dominant one in that area. But with wolves for sure, it's a constant. My point of this is like I could see the argument for there always being an alpha, but I could also see it not being, and it seems to point more towards there not being. So I agree with that. But it's such a complex social structure that it constantly changes, and it's really just based off of seniority, from what I've understood. I've never interacted with wolves, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's a misconception I see all the time, and then that leads into training. And I'm sure there's toxic people in your guys' like culture or your circles, but dude, dog trainers are some of the worst people on earth, like on social media for sure. And like for people that preach positive reinforcement all the time, like they can be vicious and like they'll hunt you down. And like there's some lady, Brianna Medea, she's like has to like get restraining orders from people because it's the whole thing with her dog. She accidentally ran it over. Like whole thing. It seemed to be a total accident. And she had all her followers like pay, like, you know, can you help me pay for the dog? And then like people found out that she actually ran the dog over. It wasn't an accident, but she didn't do it on purpose. So she had to pay all these people back. But like you can say like that was a shitty thing to do or not, but to sit there and harass and like tell her like that you know, wish she's dead and all sorts of stuff like that, like it goes, and that's like one aspect. And I'll post something about dogs and I'll get someone in my DMs that's like, you know, for an academic like me, I really wish you would like not talk about this, or you shouldn't use prong colors, and like it's just vicious. And I train my dog, and I've put a lot of money into it, and like I do a lot of hard work with him too. And he's a high energy dog. He's supposed to breed like hunt moose. That's like what his thing is. But I have him in suburbs and he lives in my bus with me. And I drive around to different places, and it's hard to take care of that. And like when a dog is bred to hunt moose, and I watched his mom hunt elk and stuff, like
Wow.
there's a lot of I should say I've seen his mom who hunted elk, but I saw her like interact with like her owner and stuff. You can't exactly like train that dog to be the perfect suburban like dog. If you have the money and resources to all day, sure, but like I can't take that out of my dog. And if you buy a dog, I didn't buy him for hunting, but I just liked the breed, and there was a litter in town, so I got him. That's a whole other thing too. Like people will find out that I didn't adopt him from a shelter and like unfollow me. And it's like,
how dare you
want me to leave him there? Like, should he
This
just
is
die?
something we talk
Like,
about a lot too.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
We can get into that, but yeah, it's so like vicious or whatever, and I can't like. I'll get people that say like, well, if he chases bikes or like he's bitten somebody before, like that's on you. Like it's the trainer, it's not the dog. And I'm like, well, no, like he's supposed to hunt moose. Like he has that instinct in him. He's not supposed to like sniff around like a bloodhound. He sniffs, but like he's not supposed to be docile like a lab or like a Pomeranian. And like it's not always on the trainer, and I think someone put it pretty well. It's the like the breeder, not the breed. And like you could have a breeder who like lies and says, oh, they're fine, it's a docile like group, but like they're really were just vicious, but they need to sell the puppies and get rid of them and stuff. There's that. And if you get a dog from a shelter, clearly has some issues, that's why it's in a shelter, or maybe usually I would say. So like yeah, and like we can get into the whole thing about pit bulls too. Like I've never met a pit bull I didn't like. Like one has for sure bitten my dog before at a dog park for like no reason, but I don't get mad. It's just what the breed does. They like do that, but it's not like I don't think all pit bulls are like that. Like I'm not gonna generalize and do that, but it's just
I've been attacked by 2 pit bulls, so
have you by a
just kidding.
okay.
I have been attacked by them, but I still like them actually. But
Okay.
but one time it was a pretty intense experience getting attacked by one. I can tell that story later, maybe. But
sure, I'd love to hear it. I've never been. I guess I've been bit by a dog, but not like viciously. So to answer your question on the expelling myths and stuff, I would say like the whole "it's the trainer, not the dog" is like, that's just bullshit. Like you can't tell me you buy a border collie for like herding sheep the way it does, and you buy a lab because it's a family dog. But like when a dog that is bred to do other things does that thing, you're like, oh, it's the trainer. Like, I like
Mhm.
that. It's a
Yeah.
wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so complex. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting with like, especially
Yeah.
with having a wolf dog. It's like, there's so much misconception around them, and it's so fraught, and it is also higher stakes because like she does have different kind of jaw pressure than a standard dog.
Sure.
And like she is really strong, and like she can jump 6 foot fences if she wants to. Like she's a serious animal. But it's also
6 feet. Yeah.
like some people can like her brother actually. So I'm friends with another person who got her brother from the same litter, and she's like very been super on it with socializing him, training him. And he was also kind of like the pick of the litter in terms of just being like the most like kind of docile one of the whole bunch. And she can like
Yeah.
take him to the store with her, and he's like a total sweetheart, just like any good dog. It's like if I take our dog to Home Depot, she's gonna freak out. She'll see like the ceiling fans in there and like want to run.
Really.
And it's like and it's like interesting because when she was a puppy, we did take her to places like that to socialize her, and it went fine when she was a puppy. But now like she just has like very pronounced preferences, and at a certain point it's like it's like you have to learn your animal, right? And, like learn their
Mhm.
quirks, learn like what to avoid with them. And now it's like at this point it's easier for me to just not take her to Home Depot.
Right.
And like not subject her to the stress of that experience for her.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like learn their shortcomings and like work around it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to join. Sorry. I'm trying to join.
Recording in progress.
Oh God. I had to try to join via a different
Different
path.
device.
My
Nice.
computer wasn't. Yeah, my computer just was not cooperating. I'm not even 100%. I'm not. I'm honestly not 100% sure why. So
You're here now.
Yeah, it's good.
yeah,
It's
I got
working.
the phone game.
Cool.
Yeah, we'll see if it works. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned like having sort of toxic people in your various industries, and with us it's the same. We have it's kind of goes in the other direction with us because most of the push in the reptile community is to buy from breeders, specifically from breeders, because if you're not buying from a breeder, then usually what you're buying is a wild caught animal. You're buying an import.
Mhm.
Oh,
And
okay.
and what you have is sort of a double-edged sword. Like on the one hand, all the animals come from the wild in the first place, right? So but there really is there are plenty of ethical reasons to suggest you really ought to, if you're just buying a pet, you really should just be going for a captive bred animal, from somebody. It's just going to be the better way to go about it, the more sort of considerate way, slightly more ethical in various ways. But then we also have really, without like naming specific people in particular, we've got a lot of people in the reptile community who basically take advantage of the animals that they're working with to capture sensational videos and sensational viral stuff, and use that in an effort to build a following. It's not as if that's the only thing that they do. And it's not as if that they're not, nobody's perfect, and not everyone has the same perspective on all of this, but it's fairly unpopular in a huge swath of the reptile community. This sort of, honestly, we should call it what it is, right? Like semi-abusive or like borderline abusive treatment of animals for the sake of clicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the very least, exploitative.
Yeah, for sure. And so that gets really complicated, and so it's there. And you mentioned, then the other thing that you mentioned, the it's not the breed, it's the breeder, it's the same thing here. I spent many years adopting our dogs that we had for our family from various shelters and various, organizations. And, sometimes it was no problem. Sometimes we get great dogs, occasionally, but we also got a lot of problem animals, and it was a lot. It was a burden you don't recognize you're taking on. And it doesn't mean that those animals don't deserve attention and don't deserve the good home, but God, it's difficult, it's like, it's not that simple. It's like, you have to know what you're getting into, and you can't know what you're getting into with a single visit in a neutral space where this dog's terrified out of its mind. It's highly complicated. And we, ever since we got our golden, we got my family, our golden and her brother, we got them from a breeder. And now it's like every dog I want to get, I'm going to buy from a goddamn breeder. Like the effort that breeder went through to make sure that the animals were healthy, well-adjusted, potty trained before we even got them. My dog, she's 8 years old. She's had one accident in the house, one. And it was one pee. She just peed on the floor. And it was just because she'd never been here. Yeah, me too. We've all done it, man. We've, whether it was the edibles or the beer, you name it. And
it not that say it irks me. It's just like, I understand the push, and like I support it too. Like, I don't want an animal to rot in a shelter, and like, it is sad when they watch people come by and don't get picked, because dogs thrive on interacting with humans. It's their thing. But like, these people that push and like, oh yeah, like I just got this rescued pit bull, or like I got this rescued lab, or this rescued German Shepherd and stuff like that. Like, they just get it because, especially like when I lived in Brooklyn, I saw a lot of it, and it's like the hipster thing, and like get Denver, a lot of it too. I see too. Like, they don't know how to take care of a dog, and like it bites people, and it's like, I'll watch them. I don't go to dog parks because other people don't watch their dogs, especially like in New York where they're huge, but they're texting the whole time, and like the dog's doing its own thing. And my dog will, like, he's loud and he's big and he's very vocal and mouthy. That's just how he is. Not to say he's biting the dogs, but he'll growl and growl, and then his hair will stick up, and then he'll not bite them, but he'll like snap. And like, then I get yelled at. And that's happened twice. And I'm like, your dog was harassing mine. He wouldn't leave him alone.
Yeah.
Whereas my dog was like sniffing first and like went and did his thing, and I was playing fetch with him and stuff. So like, sure, my dog could probably be a little more like friendly and roll over on its back, I guess, but I can't tell him to do that. He's like a big dog. So like, I mean, I guess I could tell him to do that. I train him, but point being, like, he just wants to hang out too, and she could have pulled her dog away at any point and like been like, all right, stop, Mike, whatever. Mike, I don't know, that's the dog's name, but yeah,
Timmy.
Yeah,
Timmy. Shut up, Timmy. So another thing I'm curious about, David, and this might be maybe based on the way my tech is working, this might be like the right time to start winding back the convo. I mean, I don't mean to be that guy. I'm actually very much enjoying this conversation, and
you're good. You're crystal clear right now.
Kind of bums me out, but well, the thing is, I transferred to my phone, and my phone's battery is like 10%. And I don't have a charger where I'm sitting here, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to go back to my computer because my charger's out here in the living room. I'm like, God, dude, I'm so unprepared. I'm the world's worst Boy Scout. But
aren't you an Eagle Scout, Phil? Come on.
I was, in fact. That was a long time ago, sir. But so I guess something I'm curious about is, what are some of your goals with the work you're doing now? Like, what are your goals for the future? What are the things you're wanting to do with what you're doing from here on out? Like, if you have a clear vision of where you're headed or what you want to do.
I don't necessarily have a clear vision, and it's funny. My parents, every time I come to visit for a few days, they're like, "What's the plan?" Because I used to be a curator, and I left because this social media stuff blew up, and I wanted more time on it. And like, I make enough to get by. I would love to make way more, like I was making.
Sure.
But like, so what's your plan? I'm like, hang on, I'll figure it out. This is all so new. But ideally, like I've been interviewed for shows. I've auditioned to do like an Animal Planet thing where they said unspecified animal network, but like it's not
Mhm.
HGTV. So like that stuff, and then COVID hit. I haven't gotten any more of those really, but then I did a pilot with a show. I don't necessarily want um I don't want to host some like fancy flashy archaeology show because they always want me to do like the clickbaity like conspiracy
Mhm.
stuff, and I'm not trying to like ruin my reputation with that. And I
Mhm.
just don't stand for it sometimes. But
Sure.
I want to like not like I'm trying to think of an episodic show. The one I really liked was called Easy on Netflix. And it's just like it sounds dumb, but they're like little human stories of like, someone cheated, or like these brothers started a business together and the brother was like drunk all the time and like they had to deal with it. Just mumblecore like human stories, but I want to do that in like it says like 10,000 BC Australia, and then it's like 7,000 BC Alaska, or like 2000 BC Africa or Tanzania, and it's like a story with like correct language, correct like props and tools, correct like setting and like what they're doing, and it's just like somebody's brother died and there's a funeral, or somebody like just to show people that it's the same like it has been forever. I
That's
don't know how
great.
to write and produce a show. I can film my own stuff for sure, but it's a lot of work and a lot of money. So
Mhm.
something like that would be my goal, because I could teach through that. um and like just show don't tell, I guess, in that sense. um
Yeah.
and but like also if I got someone offered me a Bill Nye type show to teach anthropology, I would do it and hire some friends. But
Yeah.
until then, man, it's just post stuff that I like. I would love to do comedy all the time, but like I gotta sit somewhere in a city and like do the open mic thing it's just I don't have time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. That's interesting. Um, well, so we have this kind of recurring theme for the show, which is we ask people this same closing question.
Wait.
Oh, sorry. Wait, no, go ahead,
No, no.
Roy.
Can I do a
Yeah.
riff off this one instead?
No.
Well, I want to do two
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hell
questions.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, as Phil was saying, and I just really cut him off.
No, do it,
We have
please.
this riff of this closing question. We ask all of our guests, and typically our guests are people within herpetoculture. We ask why herpetoculture.
Yeah.
Like why do we do this? Why does it matter? And I would love to hear your answer to that from just like totally outside perspective as someone who's not actively involved in herpetoculture, but also I want to ask you why archaeology?
Mm.
Yeah. um
Like for you personally, but also for us, the capital U us.
See, I'm gonna answer why herpetoculture first.
Either one, whichever one you want to go with first.
I need a second to think. I probably should have thought of that before I did the episode with you guys.
We should have sent you that.
I guess for when the reptile people take over, we know like how to talk to them better. I think reptiles are fascinating. I don't know if you guys follow Gator Boy Chris is his name. I don't know if he's like a
Yeah.
Tiger King situation, but he seems like a chill dude. Always messages me. But yeah, he's like feeding the alligators and like chicken, and he shows you how they interact, and it's just I never knew that. I didn't realize alligators could like, and I guess he's clicker training them. I should have known that, but or like food training them.
They're extremely smart.
Yeah, like I didn't know that, and he was showing like their like scent or their hearing like ear thing. It's like little flaps that open up. Didn't know that. The fact that they are kind of unchanged, kind of like sharks for so long.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like they've won the Darwinian race in that sense. Like they're a perfect form. And I mean, I guess they're cool to study in that sense. That's just alligators, but also crocodiles in Africa. Like whenever I watch those nature is metal things, like there's lions, there's tigers, there's like wildebeest, there's the African wild dogs and stuff, and then like there's always a crocodile right there and like the way it's so cool. Like reptiles are fascinating to me. And then yeah, as you said, ectotherms, is that the the correct
Yeah.
word? That is so cool to me too. Like I feel like we could study that more and like apply it to other things. I don't know. That's
Mhm.
I guess my
It's a
answer
good
would be
answer.
they're fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah,
It's a good answer.
that's a good answer. Yeah.
appreciate it.
You want to hear a cool factoid about how smart crocodilians are real quick? I
Yeah.
think you'd appreciate this. So crocodilians in bird nesting season have noticed that like herons and aquatic like riparian birds will come and they're collecting twigs to build their nests, and crocodilians will go and they'll collect twigs and they'll put them on their heads and then set up an ambush to wait for these birds to come to collect twigs for their
Whoa.
nests so they can
That's cool,
snap them
man.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tool
So-
use. That's cool.
Yeah.
They're-
Straight up.
they're setting traps.
They're setting traps.
It's a trap.
Admiral
Raptors.
Akbar.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Anyway, I the first time I heard that, I was like, this shit's real.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool, man. For archaeology or anthropology in general, like there's a lot of shit in the world. Like there's always been shit wrong. Like the Romans were like, oh, like these people, we gotta go conquer them, and like the Chinese were conquering other Chinese like back in the like. There's always like problems with society, but like I think studying anthropology really helps you understand more about other people. And my professor Robert Kelly put this. It's also named Robert Kelly. In a cool way was like, I guess there's two answers. You could be, if you have Somali neighbors that move next door and they're Muslim, there's two kinds of people. You can be curious, you could be xenophobic about that and like, I don't want them here. Like, I don't like this. Get them out of here. Or you can be curious. You can invite them over for dinner and ask them about their life. And like that's what an anthropologist does. And like I like to view the world that way. Like I just like, why is that way? Like I wonder what it's like to live as a homeless person in Denver for a few days. You're probably high a lot. But like but
Oh,
like
wow.
just yeah, like what is it like to grow up as a tribesman in Africa when there's like cell phones and planes flying above you and stuff? And or like somebody who's schizophrenic, like what, like how do they view the world? Because there's a lot of like evolutionary, like I think maybe shamanism was schizophrenia back in the day, and it's like an evolutionary purpose.
Yeah.
And like things like I don't know, just I can go on and on, but just understanding other cultures. And for archaeology, learning about people in the past, like just how they lived and like just based on the stone tools they had. I wonder, like, so we just have stone tools. What was their language? Was it click based? Did it sound like French? Was it tonal like Chinese?
Mm.
What clothes did they wear? Did they like, what were their dances? Like things like that. You can't answer without a time machine, but like archaeology brings you closer to that. And like in case the apocalypse or like The Last of Us starts tomorrow, the only way to like fully survive correctly is to understand like how indigenous peoples lived where they did. Because they clearly lived in North America for over 15,000 years just fine using the landscape, and like you could do it
Yeah.
And without degrading it.
Yeah, they did burn
In
the
most
plains a
places.
lot to make stuff,
Yeah.
but it made it better, I
Yeah.
think, in some ways. But yeah, and like without polluting and all that kind of stuff. But and I guess to answer the dog thing, they're just an artifact of our ice age past. And you said it pretty well, Roy. It's like they're a fundamental part of being human. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Man, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Just that how much the world would be a better place if we regarded what we don't know with curiosity rather than fear.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of it, honestly. I mean, for all forms of prejudice, or I think that even applies to reptiles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Can I ask you guys why
Yeah.
herpetology?
Yeah. Roy, you want to go first?
you go first.
Oh shit.
I
Well,
can go if you want, but
no, I want to go. It's just, it's fine. I just feel like I'm always the one who, anyway, no, it's okay. It's good. It's good. For me, I think it was pretty well summed up by the guy we referenced earlier, Philippe de Vogely, by saying that the herpetoculture is a way of gaining recognition of another kind of consciousness. It's a way for me to connect with the world around me in a way that is not available in the same way that it used to be. It fulfills something in me that is extremely difficult to elaborate on and articulate.
Yeah.
But there's something there, and I don't know if it's a fluke or as one of our previous guests put it, a disease, or what, I don't know, but it's something, and it's there, and it is absolutely undeniable, because this has been with me since before I have any memory of my own consciousness. I've always tried to do this. I've always tried to interact with reptiles and amphibians. I've always wanted to bring them inside. I've always everything. And I don't know where that comes from, and I don't know why it is, but it brings me an unbelievable amount of fulfillment and joy. So, yeah.
That's a cool answer, man.
yeah.
Respect.
Glad you like it.
Yeah, pretty much what he said. I mean, it's it just meets something in me that nothing else has in my life. It's just deeply gratifying on this level, and it's so interdisciplinary. I think that like learning about herpetoculture has introduced me to so many other things that I'm interested in, like botany and geography and geology and
Chemistry.
chemistry, other cultures, all of that. It's been a gateway to like just a very like generalized, like like as E.O. Wilson would put it, like a biophilia, love for the world, love for the natural world. I feel like as a kid growing up in a kind of rough and tumble environment in an inner city context, the first thing that brought me outside was to go look for lizards and snakes, and then I fell in love with like oak trees and wildflowers and all these other things that have deeply enriched my life. And so it touches on all of these things that are meaningful and challenging to me. And I think that there's just something really valuable about stretching to meet another kind of consciousness, another kind of being, and trying to develop a greater capacity for empathy for something so different is rewarding.
And I appreciate that you asked us, because I don't think we've ever had anybody turn the question on us before. No one's ever asked us, like, why do you guys think herpetoculture? It's always been what we ask other people. So it was actually kind of nice to be able to answer that, or at least for me anyway. That was nice. Thanks
for that.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm curious about my reptophile neighbors.
Yeah. Right. There you go, dude. We're not from Somalia. Well, some of them are. But the reptiles are from Somalia.
Oh, cool, guys. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about the other forms of consciousness thing. That I have to think about that. That's cool.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's cool to hear, man. Well, thank you again for taking some time to chat with us and share the interesting area of expertise that you've cultivated over the last, X number of years. It's been a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Anytime. This was really fun. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Love to have you back sometime.
Yeah, we'd love to do that if you're up for it.
Cool. I'm in Denver a lot, so if you guys want to do one in person or something.
Oh yeah, dude. That'd be great.
I'll fly out for that.
Oh, you're not in Denver too? Okay.
No,
you have to. Roy has to be here. He's got
I'm in California.
Roy and I have become almost like we've become very, very close friends over the last few years, and I guess a couple of years, and we've never met in person.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. Isn't that weird?
It's pretty wild.
I thought maybe you guys were sharing the warehouse you're in right now of reptiles or something.
No, I wish.
Nope.
Cool.
I have
It's cool how
just
that
for the
works,
record,
man.
I have way more reptiles than Roy. Way more. Like
It's not even
Okay.
close.
Nice. Yeah, I'd love to come see him at some point.
yeah, please.
man.
Yeah, anytime you're here, I'll give you a tour.
Oh yeah.
And the same for
Awesome.
Northern California if you're ever in this area. I also have
Where-
some archaeological mysteries on my land that I would love to talk to you about.
Where you at specifically? If you don't mind me asking.
I'm in Lake County. So I'm about like I don't know if you're familiar with Santa Rosa, Napa County, Sonoma County, just north of San Francisco.
Okay, I've been to Stockton and Lodi and all over there in Sacramento, but yeah.
Yeah, that's not far from me at all. That's like 2
Okay.
hours.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Sick.
Well, where can
Sweet.
people find you in terms of your socials? I mean, we'll link to it and everything, but for those listening
Yeah.
verbally.
If you just type in David Ian Howe, people think it's Davidian Howe, but I was born just before the Branch Davidian thing, so
Yeah.
that's a good.
I never
claim.
put that together, but oh man, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of a cool name. It's just sullied now because of a violent cult, but yeah, it's David Ian Howe. You can find me on YouTube, Instagram. Well, my Instagram is Ethnocynology, but it's my name's on there. You'll find it if you type it in. And then TikTok's my biggest platform. I just post Instagram stuff on there, but you'll get the same thing on Instagram, is what I'm saying. And yeah, that's about it for now.
Thanks, man. We're
Sick.
gonna
Yeah.
hit the button and stop the recording.